The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning in September 1881, smudged with dirt and bearing the faint scent of tobacco and leather. And Cecilia Cole knew the moment she saw her father's handwriting that her life was about to change forever. She stood in the cramped Boston boarding house parlor, her fingers trembling as she broke the wax seal. The other girls had already left for their factory shifts, their chattering voices fading down the narrow hallway. Cecilia had the morning off, a rare luxury that now felt heavy with portent. Her father's words were brief, businesslike, devoid of the warmth she remembered from childhood before her mother had died and the world had turned gray and hard. "Daughter, I have secured a match for you. Owen Jameson owns a cattle ranch near Leadville, Colorado. He is 30 years of age, financially stable, and in need of a wife. The marriage by proxy will take place on October 1st. Your train ticket is enclosed. Do not disappoint me in this. It is done." Cecilia read the letter 3 times, each word sinking deeper into her consciousness like stones into water. She was 22 years old, working 12-hour days at a textile mill, living in a boarding house that smelled of boiled cabbage and broken dreams. Her father, a businessman who had remarried shortly after her mother's death, had made it clear she was no longer welcome in his new household. This arrangement was his solution to the burden of an unmarried daughter. She looked at the enclosed photograph with shaking hands. A tall man stood beside a wooden fence, his hat shadowing most of his face. What she could see showed a strong jaw and broad shoulders, but nothing of his character, nothing of his heart. Owen Jameson. The name felt foreign on her tongue when she whispered it aloud. The proxy marriage took place as planned. Cecilia stood in a Boston courthouse, wearing her mother's ivory dress, altered to fit her smaller frame, and spoke vows to a man represented by a lawyer she had never met. The whole affair lasted less than 20 minutes. She signed papers that bound her life to a stranger, her hand steady despite the terror coursing through her veins. When it was done, she was Mrs. Owen Jameson, and she had never even heard his voice. The journey west took 18 days. Cecilia watched the landscape transform through train windows streaked with soot and rain. The cities gave way to farmland, the farmland to prairie, the prairie to something wilder and more beautiful than anything she had imagined. Mountains rose in the distance like the bones of ancient giants, their peaks crowned with early snow that caught the October sunlight and blazed like fire. She shared her compartment with a variety of travelers. There was Mrs. Henderson, a widow returning to her son's family in Kansas City, who warned Cecilia about the roughness of Western men and the hardships of frontier life. There was a salesman named Mr. Pritchard, who spoke endlessly about the opportunities in mining towns, his voice an irritating drone that Cecilia learned to tune out. And there was a young couple, newlyweds, who held hands and whispered to each other with such obvious love that Cecilia had to look away, her chest tight with longing for something she feared she would never know. At night, lying in her narrow berth as the train rocked and swayed, Cecilia allowed herself to imagine. Perhaps Owen Jameson would be kind. Perhaps he would be patient with her nervousness, her ignorance of Western ways. Perhaps in time they might find companionship, even affection. She did not dare hope for love. Love was for storybooks and foolish girls, not for women who married names on paper and traveled 1,000 miles to claim their uncertain futures. Leadville, Colorado emerged from the mountain landscape like something from a fever dream. The town sprawled across a valley more than 10,000 feet above sea level, surrounded by peaks that seemed to touch the sky. Smoke rose from countless chimneys and mine works, and even from the train platform, Cecilia could hear the sounds of industry, of hammers and saws, of shouting men and the creak of wagon wheels. The air was thin and cold, tinged with the smell of wood smoke, and something metallic she could not identify. She stepped onto the platform with her 2 worn carpetbags, her legs unsteady after so many days of travel. The altitude made her head swim and her heart race. Around her, people moved with purpose, greeting loved ones, conducting business, living lives that were utterly foreign to her experience. She smoothed her traveling dress, dark blue wool that was already too light for this climate, and searched the crowd for a tall man who might match the shadowed figure in the photograph. No one approached her. Minutes passed, then an hour. The platform emptied as passengers dispersed into the town. The sun began to sink behind the western peaks, and the temperature dropped with alarming speed. Cecilia clutched her shawl tighter and fought back tears. She had traveled nearly 2,000 miles to marry a stranger, and he had not even bothered to meet her train. Mrs. Jameson. The voice came from behind her, rough and uncertain. Cecilia turned quickly, hope flaring in her chest. But the man who stood there was not the figure from the photograph. He was shorter, older, with a weathered face and kind eyes that crinkled at the corners. He held his hat in his hands and shifted his weight from foot to foot with obvious discomfort. "Yes," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I am Mrs. Jameson." "Name's Walter Crane, madam. I work for Mr. Jameson. He sent me to fetch you." The man would not meet her eyes, and dread began to pool in Cecilia's stomach. "I see. Is my husband occupied with business?" Walter Crane's weathered face flushed red. "Madam, I think it's best if we get you to the ranch. It's a 2-hour ride and the temperature drops fierce after sunset." "I have a wagon waiting." Cecilia wanted to demand answers, to insist on knowing why her husband of 3 weeks could not be bothered to greet her himself, but exhaustion and the thin mountain air made her dizzy. She nodded and allowed Walter to take her bags. The wagon was rough, built for function rather than comfort. Walter helped her onto the bench seat and tucked a thick blanket around her legs. Then he climbed up beside her, clicked to the horses, and they began to move through the muddy streets of Leadville. The town was raw and new, most of its buildings constructed of unpainted wood that gleamed golden in the fading light. Saloons lined the main street, their doors swinging open to release bursts of piano music and raucous laughter. Women in bright dresses called to men from balconies, and Cecilia felt her face heat as she understood what they were. She had heard of such places, but seeing them openly operating in broad daylight was shocking. "Leadville's a mining town, madam," Walter said, as if reading her thoughts. "Silver mostly. Drew more than 30,000 people in just a few years. It's rough, but there's money to be made for those willing to work hard." "And my husband's ranch?" Cecilia asked. "Is it in the town?" "No, madam. The Triple J is about 10 miles out up in the valley. Good grazing land, protected from the worst of the winter winds. Mr. Jameson runs about 300 head of cattle, supplies beef to the mining camps and the town." Walter's voice warmed when he spoke of the ranch, and Cecilia felt a small measure of relief. At least the property itself seemed sound. But the question of Owen Jameson himself continued to gnaw at her. They left the town behind, following a rough trail that climbed into the mountains. Twilight painted the sky in shades of purple and gold, and stars began to emerge with a brilliance Cecilia had never seen in Boston's hazy skies. The wagon rocked and bounced over ruts in the road, and despite the beauty around her, Cecilia's anxiety grew with each passing mile. "Mr. Crane," she finally said, unable to bear the silence any longer. "Why did my husband not come to meet me himself?" Walter was quiet for so long that Cecilia thought he might not answer. Then he sighed, a sound heavy with something that might have been pity. "Madam, I think there are some things you should know before we arrive at the ranch. Owen Jameson is a good man, one of the best I have ever worked for, but he is not the man who arranged your marriage." Cecilia's heart stuttered. "I do not understand." "Owen's father, Josiah Jameson, arranged the whole thing. He is a powerful man in these parts, owns the biggest ranch in 3 counties down near Denver. He has plans for Owen, always has, and those plans included a suitable wife from back east. Owen did not know anything about it until after the proxy marriage was done." The world seemed to tilt beneath Cecilia, and she gripped the edge of the wagon seat to steady herself. "You are telling me that my husband did not want to marry me?" "I am telling you that Owen Jameson had no say in the matter, same as you," Walter said gently. "His father is a hard man, used to getting his way. Owen has been trying to build his own life, separate from his father's empire, but Josiah found a way to bind him anyway. I am sorry, madam. This is not how any of this should have been done." Tears blurred Cecilia's vision, but she blinked them back fiercely. She had cried enough over the past 3 weeks, mourning the loss of her freedom, the death of dreams she had barely allowed herself to acknowledge. She would not arrive at her new home weeping like a child. "Does he know I am arriving today?" she asked, proud that her voice remained steady. "Yes, madam, he knows. And he still sent you instead of coming himself." Walter hesitated. "Owen is not good with words, madam. He is afraid he will say the wrong thing, make this harder than it already is. But he is a good man," he repeated, as if this could somehow make the situation bearable. "Give him a chance, and I think you will see that." The Triple J Ranch appeared as full darkness fell, a collection of buildings nestled in a valley between 2 mountain ridges. Lamplight glowed in the windows of the main house, a sturdy 2-story structure built of logs and river stone. There were several outbuildings, corrals where horses moved like shadows, and in the distance, Cecilia could hear the lowing of cattle settling for the night. Walter helped her down from the wagon, and Cecilia stood on uncertain legs, staring at the house that was now her home. The front door opened, and a figure emerged, backlit by the warm light from within. He was tall, just as the photograph had suggested, with broad shoulders and long legs. He moved down the porch steps with the easy grace of someone comfortable in his own body. And as he came closer, Cecilia could finally see his face clearly. Owen Jameson was younger than she had expected from the photograph, perhaps 28 or 29, with dark hair that fell past his collar, and a face that was all strong lines and sharp angles. His eyes, she noticed even in the dim light, were an unusual shade of green, like aspen leaves in spring. He was handsome in a rough, weathered way that made her Boston suitors seem soft and insubstantial by comparison. But it was the expression on his face that caught her attention. He looked as terrified as she felt. "Mrs. Jameson," he said, his voice a deep rumble that seemed to resonate in her chest. "Welcome to the Triple J." He made no move to touch her, keeping a careful distance that was somehow both respectful and utterly wrong. They were married. In the eyes of the law and God, they belonged to each other. Yet they stood like strangers in the darkness, neither knowing what to say or do. "Thank you," Cecilia managed. "It is a long way from Boston. I imagine it is." Owen shifted his weight, then seemed to remember himself. "You must be exhausted and hungry. I had Maria, she is the woman who cooks and keeps house, prepare a room for you, and there is supper if you want it." "A room?" Cecilia heard the slight rise in her voice and hated it. "Are we not to share quarters?" Even in the darkness, she could see his face flush. "I thought you might want your own space, at least at first. This is all rather sudden." "We have been married for 3 weeks," Cecilia said, and now there was an edge to her voice born of exhaustion and fear and the overwhelming strangeness of everything. "I understand you did not choose this, Mr. Jameson, but neither did I. Yet here we are, bound together whether we like it or not. I would appreciate honesty, at least. Do you intend to make this a real marriage, or am I simply another possession your father arranged for you?" Owen flinched as if she had struck him. Behind them, Walter coughed uncomfortably and muttered something about seeing to the horses. The sound of his retreating footsteps left Cecilia and Owen alone in the yard, the silence between them thick with things unsaid. "I am not my father," Owen finally said, and there was steel in his voice now, an anger that was not directed at her. "Everything I have built here, I built to get away from him, from his control and his manipulations. When I learned what he had done, arranging this marriage without my knowledge, using my name to bind you to a life you did not choose, I was furious. I still am. Then why not fight it? Why not send me back? Because you are already here," he said simply. "Because annulling the marriage would ruin you, leave you with no options and no future. Because whatever else my father is, he chose well in you, I think. You have courage, coming all this way alone, and because—" He trailed off, running a hand through his hair in frustration. "Because I am tired of being alone, and maybe, if we are both honest and try our best, we can make something decent out of this mess my father created." It was not a declaration of love. It was not even particularly romantic. But it was honest, and after weeks of uncertainty and fear, Cecilia found that honesty was what she needed most. "Then perhaps we should start by being truthful with each other," she said. "I did not want this marriage. I wanted to make my own choices, live my own life. But my father decided otherwise, and I had no power to refuse. I do not know how to be a rancher's wife. I do not know anything about this life. But I am not weak, Mr. Jameson, and I am not a fool. If you are willing to try, then so am I." Something shifted in Owen's expression, a softening around his eyes that made him look younger, less guarded. "Then maybe we could start by you calling me Owen. Mr. Jameson makes me feel like my father." "Owen," Cecilia repeated, and the name felt less strange than she had expected. "And you should call me Cecilia, or Celia if you prefer. My mother used to call me Celia." "Celia," Owen said, and the way he spoke it, soft and careful, made something flutter in her chest. "All right, Celia, let us get you inside before you freeze. The altitude takes some getting used to, and the nights get cold fast this time of year." He picked up her bags with ease and led her toward the house. Cecilia followed, her legs shaky from exhaustion and the thin air. As she climbed the porch steps, she looked back at the dark valley, at the mountains rising against the star-filled sky, and wondered what her life would become in this wild, beautiful place. The inside of the house was warm and smelled of pine, and something savory that made Cecilia's stomach clench with hunger. The main room was large, with a stone fireplace dominating one wall and furniture that was simple but well made. A woman appeared from what must have been the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. She was perhaps 50, with dark hair streaked with gray and a round face that creased into a warm smile. "You must be Mrs. Jameson," she said, her accent carrying hints of Spanish. "I am Maria Gonzalez. Welcome to the Triple J. You look ready to collapse, poor thing. Come, sit by the fire, and I will bring you something to eat." Cecilia wanted to protest that she was fine, but her legs chose that moment to buckle. Owen caught her elbow, steadying her, and guided her to a chair near the fireplace. "The altitude," he explained, kneeling beside the chair so his eyes were level with hers. 10,000 feet is no joke if you are not used to it. It will take a few days for your body to adjust. You will feel tired, maybe a little dizzy. Your heart will race for no reason. It is normal. Just take it easy, drink plenty of water, and do not try to do too much at once. His eyes, this close, were even more remarkable than she had thought. Not just green, but flecked with gold and brown, like sunlight through forest leaves. And the concern in them seemed genuine, which made something loosen in Cecilia's chest. "Thank you for the warning," she said. "I thought perhaps I was falling ill. No, just adjusting." He stood, and she found herself missing his closeness, which was absurd. "I will let Maria take care of you. I have some things to see to in the barn, but I will be back in an hour or so." He was giving her space, Cecilia realized, time to settle in without him hovering. She was grateful for it, even as part of her wanted him to stay, to keep talking in that deep, steady voice that was somehow comforting. Maria brought food, a rich stew with beef and vegetables that tasted better than anything Cecilia could remember eating. There was fresh bread, still warm, and butter that Maria said came from their own dairy cows. Cecilia ate ravenously, surprised by her own hunger, while Maria bustled around the kitchen talking about the ranch and the surrounding area. "Owen is a good man," Maria said, echoing Walter's earlier words. "His father, Josiah, he is a different story. Hard and cold, that one. But Owen, he has his mother's heart. She was a gentlewoman, died when Owen was just 15. Josiah got harder after that, and Owen, he got quieter. But he is kind, Mrs. Jameson. He will treat you well, I think." "Please call me Celia," Cecilia said, "and I hope you are right about him. This is all very strange for both of us." "Love often starts strange," Maria said with a knowing smile. "My husband, God rest his soul, I could not stand him when we first met. Thought he was arrogant and too handsome for his own good. But he wore me down with his persistence, and we had 40 good years together before the fever took him. Give it time, and who knows what will grow." After she ate, Maria showed her upstairs to a bedroom that was clean and simply furnished with a large bed, a wardrobe, a washstand, and a window that looked out over the dark valley. Someone, probably Maria, had placed wildflowers in a jar on the washstand, a small touch of beauty that made Cecilia's eyes sting with unexpected emotion. "Owen's room is just across the hall," Maria said. "If you need anything in the night, just call out. I sleep downstairs off the kitchen. Now, I will bring up some hot water so you can wash, and then you should rest. Tomorrow we'll come early on a ranch." Alone in the room, Cecilia washed away the grime of travel and changed into her nightgown. The bed was comfortable, the quilts heavy and warm. She could hear the sounds of the ranch settling for the night, the horses in their stalls, the wind in the pines, the distant call of some night bird she could not identify. And beneath it all, the sound of Owen's boots on the stairs, his footsteps moving past her door to his own room across the hall. She lay in the darkness and thought about the man she had married, this stranger with the honest eyes and the careful distance. He was nothing like she had expected, which was strange because she had not known what to expect at all. He was not cruel, as she had feared. He was not cold or dismissive. He was simply a man trapped in circumstances not of his making, same as she was. Perhaps, she thought as sleep finally claimed her, that was enough to build on. Morning came with the sound of roosters and the smell of coffee. Cecilia woke disoriented, her heart pounding in the thin air, momentarily forgetting where she was. Then memory returned, and with it, a flutter of nervousness. Today she would begin her life as Owen Jameson's wife, whatever that meant. She dressed in one of her simpler dresses, dark green calico that was practical if not fashionable, and made her way downstairs. Maria was already in the kitchen, and the smell of frying bacon made Cecilia's stomach growl. "Owen is already out with the cattle," Maria said, pouring Cecilia a cup of coffee. He is up before dawn most days. But he said to tell you to take your time settling in, not to push yourself until you adjust to the altitude. Cecilia accepted the coffee gratefully and sat at the rough wooden table. Through the window, she could see the ranch in daylight for the first time. The valley was beautiful, the grass still green despite the lateness of the season, with aspens turning gold along the slopes. Mountains rose on all sides, their peaks already white with snow. It was a harsh landscape but breathtaking in its wildness. "What can I do to help?" Cecilia asked. "I am not used to being idle," Maria smiled. "There is always work on a ranch if you are willing. But today, why don't you explore a little, get your bearings? Owen thought you might like to see the place in daylight, understand where you have landed. He will be back for the midday meal, and he said he would show you around himself if you are up for it." So Cecilia spent the morning wandering the ranch yard, careful not to stray too far or exert herself too much. The altitude still made her breathless, her heart racing with minimal effort. She visited the barn, where horses nickered softly and the smell of hay and leather filled the air. She walked past the corrals, where a few horses grazed peacefully. She found the chicken coop and the small dairy barn where Maria said they kept 2 milk cows. Everything was well maintained, organized, clearly the work of someone who took pride in his property. Cecilia thought of the photograph of Owen by the fence and wondered if he had built all of this himself, carved this ranch out of the wilderness to escape his father's shadow. Owen returned just before noon, riding a large bay horse with white stockings. He sat the saddle with the ease of someone who had been born to it, moving with the horse rather than against it. When he saw Cecilia standing by the corral, he reined in and dismounted in one fluid motion. "Good morning," he said, and there was a slight awkwardness in his voice that told her he was as uncertain of how to navigate this as she was. "How are you feeling?" "Better, I think. The dizziness is less." Cecilia hesitated, then decided on honesty. "I explored a little this morning." "You have a beautiful place here." Something that might have been pride flickered across Owen's face. "I have worked hard for it. Started with nothing but a land claim and a lot of stubbornness 5 years ago. Built the house myself, with some help from Walter and a few other hands. The herd has grown from 30 head to 300. It is not much compared to my father's empire, but it is mine." "That matters," Cecilia said quietly. "Having something that is truly yours." Owen looked at her then, really looked at her, and Cecilia felt the weight of his gaze like a physical thing. "Yes," he said. "It does. Come on, let me show you around properly, if you are up for it." They spent the afternoon together, Owen showing her the workings of the ranch. He introduced her to the ranch hands, 5 men including Walter, who lived in the bunkhouse and worked the cattle. There was young Johnny, barely 18, full of energy and enthusiasm. There was Tom and Pete, brothers who had come west from Missouri. And there was an older man named Samuel, who regarded Cecilia with quiet respect and called her madam in a way that made her feel absurdly pleased. Owen showed her the cattle grazing in the far pastures, explained the rhythms of ranch life, the seasonal work of branding and calving, and bringing the herd down from the high country before the worst of winter. He talked about his plans to expand, to improve the bloodlines, to make the Triple J one of the premier cattle operations in Colorado. When he spoke of the ranch, his whole demeanor changed. The guardedness fell away, replaced by passion and pride. His hands moved as he talked, sketching out visions in the air, and his eyes lit up with a fire that transformed his face from merely handsome to something that made Cecilia's breath catch. "I apologize," he said suddenly, seeming to realize he had been talking for quite some time. "I am boring you with all of this." "No," Cecilia said quickly. No, you are not boring me at all. I like hearing you talk about it. You love this place, that is clear. I do, Owen admitted. It is the first thing in my life that has been truly mine, not given to me by my father or expected of me because of my name. Every fence post, every building, every head of cattle represents work I did with my own hands. Does that sound foolish? It sounds honest, Cecilia said. And I think I understand. I have never had anything that was truly mine either. My mother died when I was 14, and my father remarried quickly. His new wife made it clear I was not welcome, that I was a reminder of his first marriage. I worked at a factory to support myself, lived in a boarding house. Everything I owned fit in those 2 bags Walter brought from the train, so no, it does not sound foolish at all. They were standing by a fence overlooking a pasture where cattle grazed peacefully. The afternoon sun was warm despite the chill in the air, and the mountains glowed in shades of purple and gold. Owen turned to look at her, and there was something in his expression that made her pulse quicken. "I am sorry about the marriage," he said quietly. "The way it happened. You deserved better than to be shipped west like cargo to a man you had never met." "So did you," Cecilia replied. "Deserve better than having your father arrange your life without your consent." "Maybe we both got a raw deal," Owen said with a hint of dark humor. "But maybe we can make the best of it anyway. I meant what I said last night. I think you are brave, Celia, braver than you probably realize. And I would like to try to build something real between us, if you are willing. Not because my father demands it or because society expects it, but because I think we might actually be able to make this work." Cecilia's heart was pounding now, and not from the altitude. "I would like that too. I will not pretend this is easy for me. I barely know you. But I am willing to try, Owen, to give us a real chance." Owen smiled then, a real smile that reached his eyes and made him look younger, less burdened. "Then maybe we can start by being friends, getting to know each other. No pressure, no expectations beyond honesty and respect. Just 2 people trying to figure this out together." "I think I would like that very much," Cecilia said, and found she meant it with her whole heart. Over the following weeks, they did just that. Owen continued to give Cecilia her own room, never pushing for more than she was ready to give, but they spent their days together. He taught her to ride, starting her on a gentle mare named Rosie who was patient with her inexperience. Cecilia fell off twice before she got the hang of it, and both times Owen caught her before she hit the ground, his hands strong and steady on her waist, his face creased with concern. "Are you all right?" he asked the second time, and Cecilia, breathless and exhilarated and terrified all at once, found herself laughing. "I am fine. Bruised pride is all. Let me try again." "You are stubborn," Owen said, but there was admiration in his voice. "I prefer to think of it as determined," Cecilia replied, and his answering laugh was rich and warm and made something flutter in her chest. She learned the rhythms of ranch life, rising early to help Maria with breakfast, spending her mornings learning to manage the household, and her afternoons exploring the valley on Rosie, or helping where she could with the endless work of the ranch. Her hands, soft from factory work, grew calloused and rough. Her skin, pale from years spent indoors, tanned despite her best efforts. Her body, thin from years of meager rations, began to fill out with Maria's good cooking, and through it all she and Owen talked. They talked over breakfast and during long rides through the valley. They talked while mending fences and sorting cattle. They talked in the evenings by the fire, when the ranch had settled, and it was just the 2 of them in the quiet house. Cecilia learned that Owen's mother had been from Boston, like her, the daughter of a wealthy merchant who had married Cecilia Jameson against her family's wishes. She had never been happy on the ranch, had withered under Josiah's cold dominance, and had died of pneumonia when Owen was 15. Owen had been sent east to school after that, but he had hated it, hated the confinement and the expectations. He had returned west as soon as he could, striking out on his own over his father's objections. "He wanted me to stay to take over his empire eventually," Owen said one evening as they sat by the fire. "But I could not stand the thought of becoming him. So I left, and we barely speak now except when he finds new ways to try to control me, like arranging my marriage." "Do you think he meant well?" Cecilia asked. "In his own twisted way, maybe," Owen said. "He wants grandchildren to carry on the Jameson name. He wants me settled and respectable, but he does not care about my happiness or yours. He cares about control and legacy and building his dynasty. That is all he has ever cared about." Cecilia shared her own story, the loneliness of growing up with a father who remarried quickly and a stepmother who resented her presence. The grinding poverty of factory work, the constant hunger and exhaustion. The terror of receiving her father's letter and realizing she had no choice but to comply. "I was so frightened on the train," she admitted. "I kept imagining all the terrible things that might await me, a cruel husband, a harsh life. I thought about jumping off the train more than once, just disappearing into one of the towns we passed through. But I had no money, no skills beyond working a loom, so I kept going." "I am glad you did," Owen said quietly. "Keep going, I mean. I know this was not what either of us planned, but I find I am grateful my father chose you. Is that strange to say?" "No," Cecilia said, her cheeks warming. "It is not strange at all. I find I am grateful too." The first snow came in late October, a light dusting that transformed the valley into something magical. Cecilia woke to find the world outside her window white and glittering, and she rushed downstairs in her nightgown and wrapper, too excited to dress first. Owen was already in the kitchen, drinking coffee with Maria, and he looked up when Cecilia burst in, his eyes widening slightly at her state of undress before he carefully looked away. "It snowed," Cecilia said unnecessarily, pressing her face to the window like a child. "I have never seen it so beautiful." "Wait until we get a real storm," Owen said, but his voice was warm with amusement. "This is just a dusting. By January, we will have snow up to the eaves, and you will be sick of shoveling paths to the barn." But Cecilia could not imagine ever being tired of this beauty. After breakfast, properly dressed this time, she went outside and walked through the fresh snow, marveling at how it crunched under her boots, how it caught the sunlight and threw it back in 1,000 tiny rainbows. Owen found her making snow angels in the yard, laughing like she had not laughed in years, and he stood watching her with an expression that made her heart skip. "What?" she asked, suddenly self-conscious. "Am I being ridiculous?" "No," Owen said, and there was something in his voice that made her breath catch. "You are being happy. It suits you." He helped her to her feet, brushing snow from her coat with hands that lingered just a moment too long on her shoulders. They stood very close, close enough that Cecilia could see the frost on his eyelashes, could feel the warmth of his breath on her cold cheeks. For a moment she thought he might kiss her, and her lips parted in anticipation. But Owen stepped back, clearing his throat. "We should get you inside before you catch cold." Cecilia tried not to feel disappointed, but the flutter of hope in her chest was undeniable. Something was changing between them, shifting from friendship into something deeper, more complex. She saw it in the way Owen looked at her when he thought she was not paying attention. She felt it in the accidental touches that seemed to happen more frequently, his hand brushing hers when he helped her into the wagon, his fingers steadying her elbow when she stumbled. And she felt it in herself, the way her pulse quickened when he walked into a room, the way she found excuses to be near him, the way she thought of him constantly when they were apart. November brought colder weather and the first real storms. Owen and the hands worked to bring the cattle down from the high pastures, and Cecilia learned what it meant to be a rancher's wife during the busy season. She and Maria prepared huge meals for the exhausted men who came in from dawn to dusk work. She learned to treat minor injuries and brew the strong coffee that kept everyone going. She mended clothes and tended the stock that remained near the house. One evening, Owen came in late, covered in mud and exhausted. Most of the hands had already eaten and retired to the bunkhouse, and Maria had gone to her own quarters. Cecilia was alone in the kitchen, washing dishes, when Owen appeared in the doorway. "There is stew on the stove," she said, drying her hands, "and fresh bread. Sit, and I will get you some." Owen sank into a chair with a groan, and Cecilia saw the lines of exhaustion etched deep in his face. She dished up a generous portion of stew and set it before him, then poured coffee and cut thick slices of bread. "Thank you," Owen said, and there was such genuine gratitude in his voice that Cecilia felt warmth spread through her chest. She sat across from him, watching as he ate. He had lost his hat somewhere, and his dark hair was disheveled. There was a cut on his cheek that had bled and dried, and mud streaked his face and clothes. He should have looked terrible, but Cecilia found herself thinking he had never looked more real, more himself. "You are staring," Owen said, glancing up at her with a slight smile. "I apologize. I was just thinking that you work too hard. The cattle need to be brought down before the heavy snows. It cannot wait, I know, but you still work too hard." Cecilia stood and wet a clean cloth, then moved to his side. "You have a cut on your face. Let me clean it." Owen went very still as she gently wiped away the blood and dirt, revealing a shallow cut just below his cheekbone. This close, she could see the individual strands of his hair, the shadow of stubble on his jaw, the way his eyes had gone dark and intense as he watched her. "How did this happen?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "A branch caught me while we were driving cattle through a narrow pass. It is nothing. It could become infected." Cecilia dabbed the cut with clean water, acutely aware of how close they were, how his breath was coming faster now. "You should be more careful." "I am always careful," Owen said, but his eyes were on her face, tracing her features with an intensity that made her fingers tremble. "Are you?" Cecilia asked, and she did not know if they were still talking about the cut anymore. Owen's hand came up to catch her wrist, his fingers warm and rough against her skin. "Celia," he said, and her name in his mouth sounded like a prayer. "If you do not step back right now, I am going to kiss you." Cecilia's heart was pounding so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. "What if I do not want to step back?" The words had barely left her mouth before Owen was standing, his chair scraping back, his hands cupping her face with a gentleness that belied his size. He gave her one long moment to change her mind, his eyes searching hers, and then he kissed her. It was nothing like the chaste kisses Cecilia had experienced from her few Boston suitors. Owen kissed like a man starving, like she was air and he had been drowning. His lips were warm and firm, moving against hers with a hunger that ignited something deep in her core. One hand slid into her hair, scattering pins, while the other pressed against the small of her back, pulling her closer. Cecilia gasped against his mouth, and Owen took advantage, deepening the kiss until she was dizzy with it, clinging to his shoulders for balance. Time seemed to stop, the world narrowing to just the two of them, the heat of his body against hers, the taste of coffee on his tongue, the way his fingers tangled in her hair. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Owen rested his forehead against hers. "I have wanted to do that for weeks," he admitted, his voice rough. "Only weeks?" Cecilia asked, surprised by her own boldness. I have been thinking about it since the day you taught me to ride and caught me when I fell. Owen laughed, the sound vibrating through his chest where she was still pressed against him. That was weeks ago. I know. He kissed her again, softer this time, almost reverent. Then he pulled back, his hands sliding down to grip her shoulders. Celia, I need to tell you something. I need you to understand that what I feel for you, it is not because of the marriage or because my father arranged this. It is because of who you are. Your courage and your kindness and the way you laugh when it snows. I am falling in love with you, and I need to know if you feel anything similar or if I am alone in this. Cecilia's eyes filled with tears, but they were good tears, happy tears. You are not alone, she whispered. I am falling in love with you too, Owen. I think I have been falling since that first night when you were honest with me about everything, when you gave me a choice instead of making demands. Owen's smile was brilliant, transforming his entire face. He kissed her once more, then swept her up into his arms, making her squeal with surprise. What are you doing? She asked, laughing. Taking my wife to our bedroom, Owen said, heading for the stairs. If that is all right with you, we have been sleeping in separate rooms for too long. Cecilia's heart raced, but this time it was not from altitude or fear. It was anticipation, desire, and love all tangled together. I think that is more than all right, she said, and kissed his jaw, his neck, anywhere she could reach. Owen carried her up the stairs and to his room, kicking the door shut behind them. He set her down gently beside the bed, his hands trembling slightly as he cupped her face. I want this to be right, he said. I want to do right by you, Celia. Tell me if I do anything you do not like, if I go too fast. I trust you, Cecilia said, and realized it was completely true. Somewhere in the past weeks, she had come to trust this man with her whole heart. They came together in the darkness, learning each other with hands and lips and whispered words. Owen was gentle but passionate, taking his time despite his obvious desire, making sure Cecilia was with him every step of the way. There was a brief moment of pain that made her gasp, but Owen held her through it, murmuring reassurances, kissing her tears away, until the pain faded and was replaced by something else entirely. Something that built and built until Cecilia cried out his name, her fingers digging into his shoulders. Afterward they lay tangled together in the narrow bed, Cecilia's head on Owen's chest, listening to the steady thunder of his heartbeat. His fingers traced lazy patterns on her bare shoulder, and she had never felt so safe, so cherished. Are you all right? Owen asked quietly. I am perfect, Cecilia said, tilting her head to kiss his jaw. That was perfect. I am glad. Owen pulled the quilts over them, tucking her against his side. I need you to know something, Celia. What happened tonight, what is happening between us, it changes things for me. I love you. Not because we are married or because it is convenient, but because you have become the most important thing in my life. If you will have me, I want to spend the rest of my days making you happy. Cecilia felt tears prick her eyes again, overwhelmed by the depth of emotion in his voice. I love you too, she whispered. I never thought I could feel this way about anyone, but you have shown me what love can be, what it should be. And yes, I will have you, Owen Jameson, for the rest of my days and beyond. They fell asleep like that, wrapped in each other's arms, and for the first time since she had boarded the train in Boston, Cecilia felt like she had truly come home. The weeks that followed were the happiest of Cecilia's life. She and Owen moved her things into his room, making it theirs, and every night they fell asleep together, tangled in each other's arms. Their days were filled with work and their nights with love, and Cecilia marveled at how much her life had changed in just a few short months. Winter deepened, bringing the heavy snows Owen had warned her about. The ranch settled into the slower rhythms of the cold season, the cattle brought down to the lower pastures. the hands spending more time maintaining equipment and buildings than working the herd. Cecilia learned to navigate the deep snow, to keep the path to the barn clear, to help Maria preserve and prepare the food that would see them through until spring. She also learned about Owen's past in deeper detail. On long winter evenings by the fire, he told her about his mother, Elizabeth, who had loved him fiercely but had never adapted to the harsh Western life. He told her about his father's increasing bitterness after his mother's death, the way Josiah had tried to mold Owen into a replica of himself, cold and calculating and obsessed with building his empire. "He sent me east to Harvard," Owen said one evening, staring into the flames. "Thought it would civilize me, make me suitable to take over his operations. But I hated every minute of it. I felt trapped, like I could not breathe. So I left after 2 years, came back west, and told him I was going to make my own way. He threatened to disown me, said I would fail within a year. That was 5 years ago, and I am still here." "He was wrong about you," Cecilia said, curled against his side. "You have built something real and lasting. You should be proud." "I am proud," Owen admitted, "but I also know my father is not done trying to control me. Arranging our marriage was just his latest attempt. I would not put it past him to try something else." "Let him try," Cecilia said fiercely. "We have each other now. Whatever comes, we will face it together." Owen kissed the top of her head. "Yes, we will." Christmas came, and Cecilia decorated the house with pine boughs and ribbons, filling it with warmth and light despite the cold darkness outside. Owen gave her a beautiful leather saddle, custom-made for her smaller frame, and she gave him a pocket watch she had secretly bought during a trip to Leadville, engraved with their initials and wedding date. "It is perfect," Owen said, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you, Celia." They celebrated with Maria and the ranch hands, a feast that lasted late into the night, filled with laughter and good food and the warmth of people who had become family. Cecilia looked around the table at the faces she had come to know and love, and felt a contentment so deep it was almost frightening. "What are you thinking?" Owen asked later when they were alone in their room. "I am thinking that I am happy," Cecilia said. "Truly, deeply happy. And I keep waiting for something to go wrong, for this to be taken away." "Nothing is going to take this away," Owen said, pulling her into his arms. "I will not let it." But Owen's words, well-intentioned as they were, could not stop the letter that arrived in early January. It was Walter who brought it from town, returning from a supply run with a grim expression on his weathered face. He handed the envelope to Owen at the dinner table, and Cecilia saw her husband's face go pale as he recognized the handwriting. "It is from my father," Owen said quietly. He broke the seal and read, his jaw tightening with each line. When he finished, he crumpled the paper in his fist, his knuckles white. "What does he want?" Cecilia asked, fear blooming in her chest. "He is coming here. Next week. He says he wants to meet you to see how we are settling into married life. But I know my father. This is not a social visit. He wants something." The week before Cecilia Jameson's arrival was tense. Owen threw himself into work with an intensity that worried Cecilia, staying out with the cattle until after dark, coming home exhausted and silent. She tried to talk to him, to reassure him, but he was locked inside his own head, preparing for battle with his father. The day Josiah arrived dawned cold and clear. Cecilia dressed carefully in her best dress, a deep blue wool that Owen had bought for her in town. She wanted to make a good impression, despite her nervousness about meeting the man who had arranged her marriage without her knowledge or consent. Cecilia Jameson arrived in a fine black carriage pulled by matched bays, accompanied by 2 men who were clearly bodyguards rather than ranch hands. He stepped out of the carriage like a king surveying his domain, tall and broad like his son but harder, his face all sharp edges and cold eyes. He was perhaps 60, his hair silver, his clothes expensive Eastern tailoring that looked utterly out of place against the rough ranch buildings. "Owen," he said, his voice deep and carrying a hint of disapproval as he looked at his son. "You look like a common laborer." "I am a rancher, father." "We tend to look like we work for a living." Owen's voice was level, but Cecilia could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands clenched and unclenched at his sides. Josiah's cold gaze shifted to Cecilia, and she felt pinned like a butterfly on a board. He studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable, then gave a curt nod. "So you are Cecilia. You are prettier than your photograph suggested. Good breeding from what I can see. You will do." Cecilia bristled at being discussed like livestock, but she kept her voice polite. "Thank you for the compliment, Mr. Jameson. Would you like to come inside? Maria has prepared refreshments." Over coffee in the main room, Josiah outlined the reason for his visit. He wanted Owen to sell the Triple J and return to Denver to take over a portion of his empire. He said the ranch was a foolish indulgence, that Owen was wasting his potential playing at being a cowboy. He offered a sum of money that made Cecilia's head spin, more than the ranch could be worth. "No," Owen said flatly. "This ranch is not for sale, father. I have told you that before." "You have a wife now," Josiah said, his eyes flicking to Cecilia. "A wife needs security, stability. What happens when she gets pregnant? You think she wants to raise children in this wilderness, so far from civilization." "What I want," Cecilia said, her voice sharp enough to make both men look at her in surprise, "is for my husband to be happy. And he is happy here, building something of his own. I would rather live in this wilderness with a man I love than in a mansion with someone who sees me as a tool to manipulate his son." Josiah's eyes narrowed dangerously. "Careful, girl. I chose you for my son. I can unmake that choice just as easily." "No," Owen said, standing abruptly. "You cannot. Celia is my wife and I love her. This ranch is my life. You do not get to control either of those things anymore, father. I appreciate that you came all this way, but the answer is no. It has always been no, and it will always be no." The air in the room crackled with tension. Josiah stood as well, and the two men faced each other, so similar in build and feature yet so different in everything that mattered. "You are making a mistake," Josiah said coldly. "This ranch will fail eventually. The market will turn, the cattle will die, something will go wrong. And when it does, you will have nothing. No future, no legacy. Your children will grow up in poverty because of your stubborn pride." "My children will grow up knowing their father was his own man," Owen said. "That is worth more than all your money and land, father. Now, I think it is time for you to leave." Josiah's face hardened into something cruel and cold. "Very well. But do not come begging to me when everything falls apart. You have made your choice and you will live with the consequences." He swept out of the house without another word, and moments later Cecilia heard the carriage pulling away. Owen stood at the window, watching until it disappeared down the valley road, his shoulders rigid with tension. "Owen," Cecilia said softly, moving to his side. "Are you all right?" "I knew it would be bad," Owen said, his voice rough. "But somehow it is always worse than I expect. He will never accept that I want something different than what he planned for me." "Then his loss is my gain," Cecilia said, taking his hand. "Because the man he tried to create would never have made me as happy as the man you chose to become." Owen pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. "I am sorry you had to witness that. I am sorry he spoke to you the way he did." "I am not sorry. I am glad I got to tell him exactly what I think of his manipulations." Cecilia pulled back to look up at her husband's face. "We are going to be fine, Owen. This ranch, our life together, all of it. We are going to make it work because we love each other and we are both too stubborn to fail." Owen's laugh was shaky but real. "When did you become so fierce?" "I think I was always fierce. I just needed someone to be fierce for." She kissed him softly. "Come on. Let us not waste any more time thinking about your father. We have a ranch to run." The rest of the winter passed peacefully. Owen seemed lighter after his confrontation with Josiah, as if standing up to his father had freed something in him. He smiled more, laughed more easily, and his love for Cecilia deepened with each passing day, expressed in countless small gestures and tender moments. Spring came late to the high country, but when it arrived, it was glorious. The snow melted, revealing meadows filled with wildflowers. Calves were born, and Cecilia learned to help with the difficult births, rolling up her sleeves and getting covered in blood and afterbirth without complaint. The herd grew, and with it, Owen's pride in what they were building together. In early May, Cecilia realized her monthly courses had not come. She waited another week, then another, before finally confiding in Maria. "You are pregnant, I think," Maria said with a knowing smile. "I have been wondering when you would notice. You have that glow about you." Cecilia's hand went to her stomach, still flat beneath her dress. "I think you are right. Oh, Maria, I am terrified and thrilled all at once. How do I tell Owen?" "Just tell him. That man adores you. He will be over the moon." But Cecilia wanted the moment to be special. She waited until that evening when they were alone, sitting on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and rose. She took Owen's hand and placed it on her stomach. "Celia." Owen looked confused. "What are you doing?" "Giving you time to get used to the idea that in about 6 months you are going to be a father," Cecilia said, her voice trembling with emotion. Owen went very still. "A father," he repeated, his voice barely above a whisper. "You are pregnant?" "Yes," Cecilia said, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I know we have not been married very long and maybe it is too soon, but I am so happy, Owen. I am so very happy." Owen's answering smile was brilliant, and then he was kissing her, his hands cradling her face with infinite gentleness. "Too soon. Celia, this is the best news I have ever received. We are going to have a baby, our baby. A little person who is half you and half me." They sat on the porch until the stars came out, talking about the future, about names and plans and all the ways their lives were about to change. Owen was already planning to add another room to the house, a nursery that would be warm and safe. He talked about teaching their child to ride, about the ranch that would one day be theirs. "What if it is a girl?" Cecilia asked. "Will you be disappointed?" "Disappointed? Are you mad?" "A little girl with your eyes and your courage. I would be thrilled." Owen kissed her softly. "Boy or girl, as long as you and the baby are healthy, that is all that matters to me." The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Cecilia suffered through some morning sickness in the early months, but it passed quickly enough. Her body changed, her belly swelling with their child, and Owen treated her like she was made of glass, constantly worrying that she was doing too much. "I am pregnant, not dying," Cecilia said one afternoon when Owen tried to prevent her from carrying a basket of laundry. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time. I am fine. I know, I just worry." Owen took the basket from her anyway. "You are the most precious thing in my life, Celia. You and our baby. I cannot help wanting to protect you." "You can protect me without treating me like an invalid," Cecilia said, but her voice was gentle. She knew his worry came from love. Summer brought long days and hard work as they prepared for the cattle drive to market. Owen would be gone for 3 weeks, taking the herd to Denver where prices were best. He agonized over leaving Cecilia, especially with her now 6 months pregnant, but the cattle had to be sold. "I will be fine," Cecilia assured him. Maria will be here and Walter will keep an eye on things. You go do what you need to do and come home safe to us. Owen kissed her goodbye on a bright July morning, his hand lingering on her rounded belly. "Take care of my girls," he said. "Girls. So you think it is a girl now, I am hoping. A little Celia to spoil and protect." He kissed her once more. "I love you. I will be back as soon as I can." Cecilia stood on the porch and watched him ride away with the hands and the herd, dust rising behind them in the morning light. The house felt empty without him, and she pressed a hand to her belly, feeling the baby kick in response. "Your father will be home soon," she whispered, "and then we will be a real family." The 3 weeks of Owen's absence felt like 3 years. Cecilia kept busy with household tasks and helped Walter and the one hand who had stayed behind maintain the ranch. But she missed Owen with an ache that was almost physical, missed his laugh and his warmth and the way he held her at night. The baby grew more active, and Cecilia would lie awake feeling the kicks and rolls, wishing Owen were there to feel them too. She wrote him letters that she could not send, pouring out her love and her loneliness and her excitement about becoming parents. When Owen finally rode back into the ranch yard, Cecilia ran out to meet him, propriety forgotten. He swept her into his arms, careful of her belly, and kissed her until they were both breathless. "I missed you," he said against her hair. "God, Celia, I missed you so much. Never again. Next year we find someone else to take the herd to market. I cannot stand being away from you for that long." "I missed you too," Cecilia said, crying and laughing at the same time. "So much. Come feel the baby. She has been kicking nonstop." Owen's hand on her belly was warm and gentle, and his face lit up with wonder when the baby kicked against his palm. "She is strong, just like her mother." The drive had been successful. Owen had gotten good prices for the cattle, and after paying the hands and settling his debts, there was enough profit to expand the ranch, to buy breeding stock that would improve the herd, to make improvements they had been dreaming about. "We are going to make it," Owen said that night as they lay in bed, his hand splayed possessively over Cecilia's belly. "The ranch is profitable, we have a baby on the way, and I have you. Everything I ever wanted right here." "Everything I ever wanted too," Cecilia said, turning to kiss him. "I love you, Owen Jameson. Thank you for being nothing like I expected." "Thank you for taking a chance on a name on paper," Owen replied. "Best decision I never made." Cecilia laughed at that, and Owen's answering grin was full of love and joy and contentment. Their son was born in late October during the first snow of the season, a lusty baby with dark hair and his father's green eyes. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when both Maria and the doctor from Leadville looked worried, but Cecilia was strong and determined, and finally, as dawn broke over the mountains, she held her son in her arms. "A boy," she whispered, exhausted and exhilarated. "Owen, we have a son." Owen, who had paced the floor downstairs all night despite Maria's assurances that this was normal, burst into the room the moment he was allowed. He looked terrible, his face haggard with worry and lack of sleep, but when he saw Cecilia holding their baby, his expression transformed into something almost worshipful. "Celia," he breathed, dropping to his knees beside the bed. "Are you all right? Are you both all right?" "We are perfect," Cecilia said, shifting so Owen could see the baby's face. "Meet your son." Owen's hands trembled as he touched the baby's downy head, traced the tiny features with one finger. "He is beautiful, perfect, just like you." He looked up at Cecilia, and there were tears streaming down his face. "Thank you. Thank you for him, for everything. I love you so much." They named him Matthew after Cecilia's father's father, a man she remembered as kind and gentle. Matthew Owen Jameson made his presence known from the start, demanding attention with powerful lungs and an appetite that kept Cecilia busy. Owen was a devoted father, taking to the role with the same passion he brought to everything he cared about. He would walk the floor with Matthew for hours when the baby was fussy, singing old cowboy songs in his rough voice. He changed diapers without complaint and got up for the middle of the night feedings to bring the baby to Cecilia, and then stay awake to keep her company. "You are going to spoil him," Cecilia said one night, watching as Owen cradled their sleeping son with infinite tenderness. "Good," Owen said. "He deserves to be spoiled. He is the best thing I have ever had a hand in creating." "Well, second best," he amended, looking at Cecilia with so much love it took her breath away. "You are still the best thing." The years that followed were full and rich. Matthew grew into a sturdy little boy with his father's determination and his mother's quick smile. The ranch prospered, expanding year by year as Owen's careful management and hard work paid off. They added a second story to the house, creating more bedrooms for the family they both hoped would continue to grow. When Matthew was 2, Cecilia found herself pregnant again. This time, she knew what to expect, and the pregnancy was easier. Their daughter was born in April 1884, a tiny perfect thing with Cecilia's blue eyes and a sweet disposition that was all her own. They named her Elizabeth, after Owen's mother, and Cecilia had never seen her husband cry until he held his daughter for the first time. "She looks like my mother," Owen said, his voice choked with emotion. "I wish she could have met her namesake. She would have loved you both so much." "We will tell Elizabeth about her grandmother," Cecilia promised, "about the woman who loved her son enough to teach him how to love us." Life settled into a beautiful rhythm. Matthew and Elizabeth grew, healthy and happy, adored by their parents and the extended family of ranch hands and Maria who helped raise them. The ranch continued to thrive, becoming one of the most successful operations in the region. Owen's reputation as a fair and skilled rancher grew, and even some of his father's associates began to show grudging respect. Josiah himself remained distant, sending occasional curt letters but never visiting. Owen seemed content with the separation, focused on building his own legacy rather than living up to his father's expectations. When Cecilia was 28 and Owen was 34, a third child arrived, another son they named William. And 2 years later, their youngest, a daughter named Catherine, completed their family. "4 children," Cecilia said one evening, watching as their brood played in the yard, Matthew now 10 and Catherine just a toddler. "When I boarded that train in Boston 8 years ago, I never imagined this would be my life." "Are you happy?" Owen asked, pulling her close. "Truly happy." "Happier than I ever dreamed possible," Cecilia said, turning in his arms to kiss him. "You gave me everything I did not know I wanted. A home, a family, a love I thought only existed in stories. I would not change a single moment of our journey together. Not even the awkward beginning. The separate rooms and the uncertainty, not even that," Cecilia confirmed. "Because all of it led us here, to this life, to these children, to this love. I married a name on paper and traveled 1,000 miles, and the cowboy behind it was nothing I expected. You were so much better, Owen, in every possible way." Owen's smile was tender as he kissed her, long and sweet, and full of the depth of feeling that had only grown stronger with time. Around them, their children played and laughed, filling the air with joy. The mountains stood eternal in the distance, crowned with snow that caught the setting sun and blazed like fire. The years continued to pass in a blur of happiness and hard work. Matthew grew into a young man much like his father, tall and strong with a deep love for the ranch and the land. He learned everything Owen could teach him about cattle and horses, and managing the operation that would one day be his. Elizabeth was gentle and kind, with a gift for healing that led her to study medicine, traveling east to become one of the first female doctors in the region. William was the dreamer of the family, more interested in books and stories than ranching, though he worked hard alongside his father and brother. And Catherine, the baby, was fierce and fearless, more comfortable on horseback than anywhere else. Cecilia watched her children grow with a mixture of pride and bittersweet nostalgia for the days when they were small enough to hold in her arms. But she was deeply content, grateful for every moment, every memory they created together. Owen grew older gracefully, the years adding silver to his dark hair and deepening the lines around his eyes, but he was still strong and vital, still passionately devoted to his family and his ranch. He and Cecilia grew closer with each passing year, their love deepening into something that went beyond passion, though that remained strong between them. It was companionship and partnership, and a bone-deep understanding that they were meant to be together. When Cecilia Jameson died in 1895, Owen received word through a lawyer. The old man had left the bulk of his empire to distant cousins, mentioning Owen only briefly in the will with a small monetary bequest, and a curt note acknowledging that his son had made his own way without the family's help. "Are you all right?" Cecilia asked, watching Owen read the documents with an unreadable expression. "I am sad for what could have been," Owen admitted. "If he had been a different man, less cold and controlling, we might have had a real relationship. But I cannot grieve too deeply for someone who never knew how to love without trying to possess. I have everything he never understood how to value. Family, love, a life built on my own terms. In the end, I won and he lost." They used Josiah's bequest to build a new barn, larger and better equipped than the old one. Owen took a certain satisfaction in using his father's money to improve the ranch Josiah had wanted him to abandon. The turn of the century found the Jameson family thriving. Matthew had married a local girl, Sarah, and they were expecting the first grandchild. Elizabeth had opened a medical practice in Leadville, treating miners and townspeople alike with skill and compassion. William had gone east to attend university, pursuing his love of literature and writing. And Catherine, at 16, was already one of the best riders in the region, winning competitions and breaking hearts. Cecilia was in her early 40s now, her dark hair threaded with silver, her body bearing the marks of 4 pregnancies and years of hard work. But she had never felt more beautiful, because Owen still looked at her like she was the most precious thing in his world. "We are going to be grandparents," Owen said one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, a ritual they had maintained for 20 years. "How did we get old enough for that?" "I have no idea," Cecilia said, leaning against his shoulder. "It seems like just yesterday I was stepping off that train, scared and alone, not knowing what waited for me." "I am grateful every day that you stepped off that train," Owen said, kissing her temple. "That you took a chance on a life you did not choose. You made me better, Celia. You made everything better." "We made each other better," Cecilia corrected. "That is what love does when it is real." Their first grandchild, a boy named Owen for his grandfather, was born in the spring of 1901. Cecilia held him in her arms and marveled at the continuation of their legacy, this tiny person who carried their blood and their name into the future. More grandchildren followed as the years progressed. The ranch house rang with the laughter of multiple generations, and Cecilia could not have been happier. She had gone from being alone and unwanted to being the matriarch of a large, loving family. On their 25th wedding anniversary, Owen surprised Cecilia with a trip back to Boston. They had never returned east together, and Cecilia was shocked when Owen presented her with the train tickets. "I thought you might want to see where you came from," Owen said. "Show me the places that shaped you before you came west." Boston was both familiar and utterly foreign after so many years away. The city had grown and changed, but more than that, Cecilia had changed. She was no longer the frightened young woman who had worked in a factory and lived in a boarding house. She was confident, strong, a woman who had built a life worth living. They visited the courthouse where she had married a name on paper, and Cecilia laughed at the irony of it all. "If I had known then what I know now, I would have been running to that train instead of dragging my feet. If I had known what my father's interference would bring me, I might have thanked him," Owen said. "But do not tell him I said that, even though he is dead." They returned to Colorado after 2 weeks, both eager to get home to the mountains and the ranch and the family they had built. As the train pulled into Leadville Station, Cecilia saw Matthew waiting for them on the platform, and her heart swelled with love and gratitude. "Welcome home, mother, father," Matthew said, embracing them both. "The ranch survived without you, but we all missed you terribly." "It is good to be home," Cecilia said, looking around at the town that had become so familiar, the mountains that she now knew as well as she had once known Boston's streets. "This is where we belong." The years continued their steady march. Owen and Cecilia watched their children grow into middle age, and their grandchildren begin to have children of their own. The ranch passed into Matthew's capable hands, though Owen remained active and involved well into his 70s. Cecilia filled her days with her family, with tending the enormous garden that had become her pride and joy, with writing letters to far-flung children and grandchildren, with sitting on the porch each evening watching the sunset with the man she loved. On a warm summer evening in 1921, Cecilia and Owen sat on that porch as they had done thousands of times before. They were both old now, their bodies marked by time and hard use, but their love remained as strong as ever. 40 years, Owen said, taking Cecilia's hand in his fingers still strong despite the arthritis that plagued them. 40 years since you stepped off that train and changed my life forever. Best 40 years of my life, Cecilia said, squeezing his hand. I loved you then, though I did not know it yet. I loved you when we spoke our real vows to each other, not the proxy ceremony but the words we said in our hearts. I loved you when our children were born and when they grew and left us. I love you now in this quiet moment more than I have ever loved you before. I love you too, Owen said, his voice rough with emotion. Every day, every moment, you were the best thing that ever happened to me, Celia, my partner, my lover, my best friend. Everything I am, everything good in my life, started when you arrived. They sat in comfortable silence as the sun sank behind the mountains, painting the sky in familiar shades of gold and rose and purple. Around them, the ranch hummed with life, with the sounds of their family and the animals and the wind in the pines. It was a symphony Cecilia had listened to for 40 years, and she never tired of it. No regrets? Owen asked quietly. Not a single one, Cecilia said. I married a name on paper and traveled 1,000 miles to a man I had never met. The cowboy behind it was nothing I expected. He was so much better. He gave me a life beyond my wildest dreams, a love deeper than any ocean. How could I possibly have regrets? Owen pulled her close, and they watched the stars emerge one by one in the darkening sky, content in the knowledge that they had lived fully and loved well, that their legacy would continue in the children and grandchildren who bore their names and their values, that their story, which had begun with such uncertainty, had become something beautiful and lasting. The ranch they had built together would endure for generations. The love they had created would ripple forward through time, touching lives they would never meet. And in that moment, Sitting together as the day faded into night, Cecilia and Owen Jameson were completely happy. Their story had started with a proxy marriage and a 1,000-mile journey into the unknown. It had weathered challenges and triumphs, births and deaths, joys and sorrows. But through it all, their love had remained constant, growing stronger with each passing year, proving that sometimes the best things in life are the ones we never planned for, the unexpected gifts that arrive when we are brave enough to take a chance on the unknown. Years later, their great-grandchildren would ask about the beginning, about how Cecilia and Owen had met and fallen in love. And the family would tell the story of the young woman who married a name on paper and traveled 1,000 miles west, and the cowboy who was nothing she expected, but everything she needed. They would tell of how that uncertain beginning had blossomed into a love story for the ages, a testament to courage and honesty and the power of two people choosing each other, day after day, year after year, for the rest of their lives. And when Cecilia passed peacefully in her sleep at the age of 84, surrounded by her children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, Owen held her hand one last time and whispered, "Thank you for taking that train, my love. Thank you for everything." He followed her 6 months later, his heart simply unable to continue without its other half. They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking the ranch they had built, their graves marked with simple stones that bore their names and the dates of their long lives, and beneath that, words that captured the essence of their story. Two hearts, bound by chance, united by love. The Triple J Ranch continued to thrive under the stewardship of their descendants, a living legacy to what Cecilia and Owen had built together. And on summer evenings, when the sun set behind the mountains and painted the sky in shades of gold and rose, it was said you could sometimes see two figures sitting on the porch of the old house, holding hands and watching the stars emerge, their love enduring beyond death itself, eternal as the mountains that had witnessed their remarkable journey together. Their story became legend in the region, passed down through generations as proof that love could bloom in the most unexpected circumstances, that courage and honesty and commitment could transform a marriage of convenience into something extraordinary. Young couples starting their lives together would invoke the names of Cecilia and Owen Jameson, hoping their own love might someday become as deep and lasting. The old ranch house still stood more than a century later, lovingly maintained by the family, its walls holding the memories of laughter and tears, of births and deaths, of ordinary days and extraordinary moments. The porch where Cecilia and Owen had spent so many evenings remained, weathered but sturdy, a testament to the foundation they had laid not just for a building but for a family and a legacy that would endure. In the end, Cecilia Cole, who had boarded a train in Boston in 1881 with nothing but 2 carpetbags and a heart full of fear, had built an empire of love. Not the kind of empire Josiah Jameson had valued, measured in acres and cattle and dollars, but something far more precious. A family bound together by love and respect, a ranch that had nurtured generations, and a story that would inspire others to take chances, to choose courage over fear, to believe that sometimes the best things in life come from the most unexpected beginnings. And Owen Jameson, who had wanted nothing more than to build something of his own, free from his father's control, had succeeded beyond his wildest dreams. He had built not just a successful ranch, but a home filled with love, raised children who would carry his values forward, and loved a woman with such depth and devotion that their story became the stuff of legend. Together, they had taken the hand they were dealt, a marriage arranged without their consent by a manipulative father and transformed it into something beautiful. They had chosen each other, not once in a courthouse or a proxy ceremony, but every single day for more than 60 years. And in that choosing, in that daily commitment to love and honesty and partnership, they had created something that would outlast them both. The story of Cecilia and Owen Jameson proved that love is not about the beginning but about the journey, not about the circumstances that bring two people together, but about what they choose to build once they are united. It proved that courage comes in many forms, that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is step off a train into the unknown, or stand up to your father and choose your own path, or simply wake up each morning and choose love again. Their legacy lived on in the faces of their descendants, in the stories told around dinner tables, in the values passed down through generations. The Triple J Ranch remained a symbol of what could be built with hard work and dedication and love. And Cecilia and Owen themselves, though long gone from the physical world, remained alive in the hearts and memories of those who came after, proof that one brave decision, one journey into the unknown, one choice to love despite fear and uncertainty, could change not just two lives but generations to come. As the sun set over the Colorado mountains on another day, casting the same golden light that Cecilia and Owen had watched together for so many years, their story continued to inspire, to remind people that love can bloom in the most unexpected places, that marriages of convenience can become marriages of the heart, and that sometimes the cowboy behind the name on the paper is nothing you expected and everything you never knew you needed. The end came peacefully for their story, as it had come peacefully for them, not with drama or tragedy but with the gentle closing of a beautiful chapter, the satisfaction of lives well lived and love well tended. They had started as strangers bound by a contract neither had chosen, and they had ended as soulmates whose love transcended death itself. And in between those 2 points, they had lived fully and loved deeply and built something that would endure long after they were gone. This was their gift to the world, the legacy of Cecilia Cole and Owen Jameson. Proof that love is a choice, renewed daily, that courage is rewarded, that honesty and respect form the foundation of lasting relationships, and that sometimes, when you are brave enough to say yes to the unknown, you find exactly what you were always meant to have, even if you did not know you were looking for it. And so their story ended not with an ending at all, but with a continuation, a legacy that would ripple forward through time, touching lives in ways they could never have imagined when Cecilia first stepped off that train in Leadville, Colorado, a frightened young woman about to meet the cowboy who would change her life forever. Their love became eternal, their story immortal, their legacy a beacon of hope for all who believed in the transformative power of love, courage, and the willingness to take a chance on the unknown.